Does anybody here not know who Rob is? Nice. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3. Okay, have you guys heard of the company Roman or BarkBox? This guy made it all happen. Rob was the employee number 3, co-founder at Bark, and then left and decided there's more to do and ended up going to start Roman and built a multi-billion-dollar telemedicine healthcare brand. And so I'm really excited to be here. Rob has become a friend over the years.
Thank you for having me.
And excited to chat with you all. So we're gonna do a couple of questions and then we're the last panel. So we've got as much time for Q&A as you guys want. So feel free to write down your questions and we'll get into it. So Rob, before we get to Ro, could you tell us how you got to the world of Bark? What got you there? Were there any things in that journey that were pivotal that led you to Bark and be a co-founder there?
Sure. So, small clarification. This is hot. I'm not a co-founder of Bark. I was an early employee there, and so I don't want to be misquoted on the internets. But yeah, my background, I kind of came up through healthcare consulting actually, and it was a very interesting and then very boring job where I was just feeling like there wasn't a lot of the dopamine hits you get with like do something one day and then the next day something good happens or something bad happens and you react to it. So I got involved with daily deals. I started a daily deal website back in the day when those were a thing, half-price restaurants and massages. And then I was kind of looking around for what came next, and I actually met the Bark team at a career fair. Totally random. I wanted to meet them. My wife and I are big dog fans. Dogs are pretty great. And so we went and chatted with them, and it was just the founding team, and they had not a lot of idea what they were doing around marketing, and they were kind of looking for their first hire, and I kind of tricked them into thinking that I was an expert, and then just learned really quickly on the fly. So yeah, dogs really attracted me, and the fact that they were willing to give me a job. So I'd say the combination of those two were pretty strong influences in getting into Bark. But in general, I just loved like quirky sense of humor. Like it wasn't just like a dog. It wasn't like kind of your grandpappy's dog brand. It was like fun and dog farts and sniffing butts and like weird dog humor for people that really like dogs. So that was a really exciting opportunity to get involved. Right time, right place. It was like 2011, 2012. Newsfeed ads just hit. And I was like...
Tell us what your CPAs were.
They were low. It was good. Times were good. And I talked to you about this before, but that was actually a really big lesson learned for me. I was sitting there with money to spend on the day that newsfeed ads dropped, and so we started doing it, and it was going really well, and kind of took this mentality of like, check, I figured out this Facebook channel, like I'm gonna go figure out Pinterest now, or figure out podcasts, and in retrospect, just being able to look back, understanding that should have spent all available time and money on the channel that was actually working. I think a lot of the growth marketers here know, like, God forbid you find something, like, don't, when it's lunchtime, you eat. Don't get in your own way. So great opportunity to really build out a team, figure out how this whole growth, user acquisition, performance marketing world worked, and, a lot of lessons learned.
At Bark and, of course, later at Ro, Bark expanded across, you had the main product and then you expanded across you basically added new products or new service lines. Yeah. Was that, what was the reason behind that? Was that to drive more revenue based off the existing customers? Was that to reach new audiences?
Yeah, I think the impetus was both, but I think that those lessons are probably even more important now than they were then, with just about how to extend LTV and how to grab more wallet share from anybody who've actually gotten into your ecosystem. So we launched a bunch of stuff. Some worked, some did not work. There was a big content property called Bark Post. It was just like weird, quirky stories and news about dog, all your hard-hitting dog news. Some of those articles hit top post on Reddit, which was just incredible for organic traffic. And then there was other things we tried. There's one called Bark Care, which was Uber for vets. So you need a vet, press the button, they'll come to your house for X amount of dollars. Still love the idea, but very difficult to market that, how to find somebody when their dog is sick. So some of these ideas are coming back into vogue now, but at the time were just really challenging to scale.
And what did you either see there as a marketer or in the space that then led you to start Row?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was really interesting is the playbook moving from, which seems completely unrelated, like a quirky dog care business into like a relatively serious healthcare business. The playbook is not all that dissimilar. Like I was really lucky. I have two really smart, talented co-founders on the Row side that handle a lot more of like the legal and the regulatory environment and like the product and the tech side, like areas where I don't have superpowers in those areas, but they didn't really know a lot about how to do the internet marketing. And so that's where we made a really solid team and was able to bring over a lot of the playbook from Bark, right? Like how to run performance, how to run TV, how to think about attribution, how to build a team, how to scale different channels, et cetera. So obviously a different subject matter and a different world working in healthcare, but a lot of the same principles really help.
And Row grew insanely fast.
Row grow real good.
Row grow really good. No, Row grew really fast. What were some of the drive? So obviously you had these paid channels that you guys were really good at. I think you guys have the OG, like you have the PayPal mafia of performance marketing from the early days of Row. But what took you guys from 50 to 300 million in revenue? Or what was the big multiplier? Once you hit mid 8 figures, how did you think about you're going to get to mid 9 figures?
Yeah, I mean, look, the kind of what I mentioned before, I think is a really important, especially for this group. Like as marketers and growth people, there's only so much you can do with the products you have, right? There's like a local maximum you reach where it's like there aren't more magical channels, right? Like maybe you've tried Reddit for the 5th time, you've tried Pinterest, you're trying Twitter again. Like the expansion of LTV is so important. I think more important to like our types of roles than it has ever been. Like I was talking with Eric from Mockingbird before, like they're launching lots of new products. Like that is where growth comes from, is finding new products and services that you can offer to people. They can both extend into new areas and bring in new people, but also just help increase the overall wallet share that an existing customer is spending with you. So I think that those are areas that really helped us grow from where we were to where we are now. We started in the sexual health space. It was erectile dysfunction meds prescribed online, delivered to your door, which was, taboo. It was a taboo topic. We liked that it was taboo. We could really like lean into like the medical advisory board and all the amazing doctors that we'd brought into the fold. But then from there, able to parlay like the platform that we built. So a national physician network, a national pharmacy network with 10 different distribution sites, like a whole bunch of different systems that were in place that let us then go into dermatology, into weight management, into fertility management. So I think it's definitely a big driver. And then being able to be smart about tests further up the funnel as well. And understanding that you have your set of digital core channels in many cases, but then being really smart and honest about the performance of some of those things further up the funnel.
And so earlier I was talking with Ben from Hubble, and one of the things that I asked him were what he looks at as tactical top of funnel awareness, middle of funnel channels. I feel like with Row, you guys out of the gate pretty much hit your local maximums of Facebook and basically all the digital channels you had access to. How did you then think about, okay, now we've got to reach a much larger audience or a different type of audience or an audience that doesn't normally shop on Instagram ads? Yeah. How did you think about reaching them, and what were some of the things you guys did?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I think we took a little bit of the opposite approach, not on purpose, but it was almost easier for us to run on TV doing erectile dysfunction ads because people were used to seeing Viagra and Cialis ads for years, like old weird people in the bathtub. That was like a pretty popular trope. It was a lot harder to run on the digital channels. Like Facebook did not know what to do with us. We got kicked off the platform constantly. Same with Google. So it was actually a much harder process to scale up properly on digital. And so we wound up leaning more heavily into some of these top of funnel channels that were more comfortable and familiar out of the gate with like our model. But yeah, I think look, we were on TV, I think 3 months after launching. That was I think something we brought over from like the Bark playbook, which was just like hey, how do we think about creative iterations? How do we think about smart ad buys? How do we test this in a geocentric manner to understand if there's actual uptick? But yeah, we kind of hit right out of the gate on some of the top of funnel pieces, because for us, we understood this was less of a product market fit. Again, we were dealing with erectile dysfunction, which like the medication is the most popular profitable drug of all time. Like there was a fit there. It was more of a product kind of channel fit or a model fit. Would people do this online? And our strong hypothesis was, especially for that product, people don't want to look a doctor in the eye and talk about trouble being intimate with their partner. So we had a lot of confidence that if we could bring it, the right messaging in front of the right audience, even if it was much further up the funnel, it would start to convert.
And one of the things that I feel like you guys did first was you were one of the first digitally native brands to have your name behind home plate at a baseball game or courtside at another game. Could you talk a little bit about some of the sports marketing? And basically, I want to know like what
What's up with that?
Yeah, what's up with that? What led you there? How did you decide? How do you look at a $250,000 IO and validate whether or not it's going to work out or not?
Yeah.
And then, anything else you have there?
No, I love that question. I love talking about sports, and it's almost like we planned some of these questions. I actually have a really strong hypothesis on how brands, even digitally native and performance-oriented brands, can think about sports in general and use that as a channel. We didn't just jump into, we're going to do a big sponsorship. Like eventually we became official partner of Major League Baseball, and we sponsored the NHL playoffs one year, and all sorts of basketball and football games and tournaments. But we really tested into it. It was very much a crawl, walk, run, where it was anchored in media, where we said, we think that we have a strong hypothesis that from a demographic standpoint, baseball makes sense for the men's health audience, right? Average age on Roman at the time was 46 years old. Average age and demo of a baseball fan is a 52-year-old male. Makes sense, right? How do we actually kind of like dip our toe in to see if that works? So what we did was we really started with streaming ads. We started just like we would buy any other streaming digital ad platform. And we started to test, right? We rolled it out during the regular season. We didn't do geocentric testing, which I would have done in retrospect, but we saw enough of a performance pop that we actually then kind of went to the walk phase, which was let's try this throughout the playoffs, right? Does it work at scale? And it actually really did. And then we wound up buying through our linear TV partner, we wound up buying a whole bunch of spots in the World Series. 2018 World Series, the best World Series ever. I don't remember who played, but I just remember rooting for extra innings and for Game 7. And we saw amazing performance, like by far our best days of, in the history of the company. And so what that led us to do is then go back to the league and say, we like that media. How do we get that media but much, much cheaper next year? And we worked out a media-centric deal where once you get to a value that is meaningful enough, and if you are a found category for them, they will throw in lots of the bells and whistles, right? We didn't say like we want to be the official partner. We said we want to do a media deal and we're willing to spend some money. So all of a sudden, home plate signage, outfield signage, like third baseline, all this extra added value. It's actually the opposite of how a lot of people approach sports. People generally will approach sports from a brand perspective, right? Like the pitch, if you're pitching to Pepsi, is like, hey, Mountain Dew, be the sponsor of the three-point competition at the NBA All-Star Game. And that's great for them from like a brand perspective. That's what they want. But that's a hard sell if you're like a growth marketer. How do you substantiate paying that amount of money? So we really took the opposite approach. Media deals, anchor it as closely to metrics as you can that you would use across other channels. And then if you see signs of life, find ways to get better prices by going directly and working with the league. And then you'll make all of your brand colleagues very happy because now they have all these new toys to play with if it happens to be official partner or signage or integrations, whatever that looks like. So that's actually something I've been spending more time with brands on, which is like, how do you approach sports? It's very interesting because like brands want to learn about this. They want to get involved. They see opportunity, but they don't really know how much it costs. Does it cost $10 million? It doesn't if you test it through media. But then agencies and teams and leagues really only know that Pepsi approach of like, do you want to sponsor the turkey giveaway for Thanksgiving? Like, maybe, but that's hard to match up against Facebook CPMs, you know? So you have to kind of earn your way into those shinier things, but my philosophy is you can really do that through media-centric deals.
So there's a company here called Tracksuit somewhere, and right there. And we use them for a lot of our like brand lift analysis or just even understanding brand penetration. Were you guys doing any of that, or were you more so seeing, the World Series would happen and our traffic would spike, and therefore it's correlated to that? How are you measuring that?
I would like to say that we were very very data driven on all of these aspects, but the reality is like you balance it, right? And you're like, this is close enough where it feels good, and it's one of those. So the short answer is no, but I'll expand on it and say like I think sports is really interesting and very different from any other type of like linear TV strategy you may find, because you can actually like see and feel the pop, right? Like if you get an ad middle of the ninth inning in the World Series, you had 500 people on your site, and now you have 50,000 people on your site. You're pretty sure where that came from, and you could feel pretty confident backing into some metrics with grain of salt, saying this feels about right, and the lift over the next couple days is larger than we've ever seen, and we're going to give credit to this big thing. So we did a little bit more back at the napkin on that, and then we got to a point where we said, like, this is good enough, where it's also so good for the brand. There's so much reputation and legitimacy that comes along with putting our logo next to Major League Baseball's logo, that we're happy to eat it, even if it's a little bit less efficient.
So as Roman was growing, TikTok was growing. There was TikTok here. You guys were the Dick Doc. Sorry, I had to.
You're canceled.
How did you think about product expansion? Because Roman started with the pills, then it went to the wipes, and then all of a sudden it was like you have the women's line, you bought another modern fertility brand, you've got the GLP stuff now. How did you what was the goal behind that? Was that we have all these customers who can use these products? Was that we need to grow the company even more? Let's launch new product lines and get in front of new customers?
Yeah, I mean, the goal was always to use the infrastructure it built to launch a lot of different things. And like the investments we made on, again, national physician network, national pharmacy network, licensed across all 50 states, it would have been a waste to just do that for one thing and highly inefficient. But we really saw over time the opportunity to expand into categories that made sense. Some worked, some really did not work. Like our second category that we launched, we saw that 18% of men who were signing up for issues with erectile dysfunction were smokers, which is highly correlated into why they were having issues with intimacy. So we said, let's launch a smoking cessation line. So we launched a line called Zero, and that's about how many members we got for it. It was shocking, actually, because we were like, this is a good thing. Like, we have an app, we have doctors, we have there's medication you can take that helps with cravings. There's gum. There's a warehouse somewhere that has like $2 million worth of gum. If anyone is interested, I can give you a discount. But what we learned was like people don't want to stop doing things that they enjoy, even if they know it is bad for them. And that was a good lesson learned, which, I think in retrospect, we might have changed some things, but we also, from a brand perspective, really liked moving from erectile dysfunction into smoking cessation. Just from a narrative perspective and being able to talk about people's overall health, while I firmly believe that, and I think there's a lot of reasons why that's important, it was hard for that to come across when you're talking to people. But launching smoking cessation, and then the third product we launched was for menopause. Like, you can see the healthcare angle much more clear in the product expansion. Now, the menopause brand also did not work. That was called Rory. A lot of different reasons, and I think that's a little bit more in vogue now. There's more healthcare brands launching around menopause, but the second learning there was just around efficiency. The medication was not very efficient when it came to like hot flashes or vaginal dryness or all these other things, and like you can only do so much marketing if the product isn't effective. So two big learnings from those product expansions, but then have been able to hit on a few others as well.
And one of the more iconic things about Roman is your domain, ro.co. How'd you get that domain? How much did it cost? What do you think? What's your opinion on vanity domains?
I mean, this is just a softball question for me. Nick knows that I love domains. I'm actually, as I've rolled off of full time and just serve on the board, I now have launched a company called Snagged that helps companies acquire domains because it's a super complicated process, but for another time. Yeah, ro.co. I think I'm being cut off. I've hit my quota. I think we're okay. ro.co is a fine domain name. It's not ro.com. Ro.com is owned by a large Chinese gaming conglomerate worth over $50 billion. We will get it. Mark my words, someone write it down. It will take time, but it's been a 6-year process. But yeah, I mean, I always tell founders, your first job is find product market fit, right? That's the most important thing. And if you can add, good digital assets on top of that, it's always helpful, but that's not going to solve for a product that doesn't work.
Since we have a few extra minutes, do you have a crazy, you bought a domain in exchange for X story?
In exchange for drugs? Is that what you're asking?
Just anything. Yeah, drugs or
I see now.
You got somebody's kid into college.
Yeah, he's on the rowing team. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of crazy stories. I mean, I'm very into domains and social handles. So I'm Rob on Twitter, if you'd like to follow me. Humble brag right there. But I've always kind of thought about those as like the original NFTs, getting access to this stuff. And it's actually very wildly inefficient and complicated. Like if you have money and you want to buy this thing and it's not for use, it seems like that should be enough. But a lot of times it's hard to track them down or convince them to sell it or whatever. So I know I've told this story to Nick before, but one of my favorites is was trying to acquire a digital asset for an investor, and the guy got a hold of him. He was like post-economic. He's like, I have millions of dollars. I was like, great, I'm happy for you. And it just kind of kept working different angles to try and figure out what motivated this guy, and found out that he was the chair of the board of this this organization that would drill water wells in Brazil and Senegal. And so I brought it up to him, and he was like, hey, if you want to sponsor a water well in Brazil, like maybe we could figure out a way to gift you the thing. So we went around, we took a whole collection for this investor, all of his friends, and then we basically sponsored them building a water well in this small village in Brazil. And he sends me updates every couple months, which is amazing. But it just took getting real deep into the bowels of the internet to figure out like what motivated this guy. And that exists all the time in like the domain and social handle space. It's just kind of a fascinating upside down world that for whatever reason I really like.
All right, last question before we start taking questions from the audience. But there's a brand out here, they're doing, let's say, $30 million in revenue, they're profitable. What would be some advice you'd give them having scaled to hundreds and billions of dollars in revenue?
It's hard to give very general advice. I would say first, great job. I think like when we came up, we launched in Row in 2017, it was just a very different environment overall in terms of fundraising, growth versus efficiency, et cetera. We're obviously in kind of the other world right now where efficiency and profitability is valued much more so than growth. My advice would be make sure you understand that dynamic really well and what the trade-off of growth looks like. Like you should, at this point, never put profitability in doubt at the expense of growth. I would much rather have a smaller profitable company than a larger company that is teetering on the verge of needing to go out and raise or take on more debt. So I think evaluating that and being really honest at the leadership level of what you all want to accomplish, and is it be profitable to position yourself for an IPO or for acquisition? Is it just a really good business that spits off cash and you can like live your life well? I think getting aligned on what the goals are really important, and then you kind of back into the strategy.
All right, guys, who's got a question? I see you right here.
So as you were developing your different product lines and you were moving the brand from ED to other categories, were you strategic in which product lines were launched first to create sort of stepping stones, or was that not really necessary, or
It's a good question. Were we thoughtful about the sequencing of product lines to get to the end result? I mean, yes and no. I would say sometimes you learn a lot by just doing stuff. I think something we learned was it had always been a desire to start with something that worked really well, like AD, and then ED, and then move into broader audiences, move into into all genders. I think something we looked at really early was not just that stat around smoking, but was for herpes and cold sores. And we saw about 25% of people that were signing for herpes and cold sores were women who were going to a men's health platform to sign up for treatment. And so you kind of are just looking for these interesting bright spots where we're like, the pain point is so bad for women who are trying to get treatment for this, they don't have other options, that they're coming to this site, like, let's spin out, Rory, which was the women's health brand, and we'll have those offerings, and then we'll expand on that more. So we knew the end goal was we wanted it to be a platform where everyone could get access to high quality, low cost health. But we kind of followed more of the tea leaves, I would say, than having like a master plan, because a lot of things we tried early on around expansion didn't work. So we had to look for like what was already working and try to amplify those.
Why baseball? What was the whole sports that were out there for TV? Why did you choose baseball?
Well, why do we choose baseball? I think a couple reasons. One, the demographic overlap for men's health was really good. As I said, average age of 46 for a Roman user at the time, and average age of 52 for a baseball viewer. The second was honestly the media structure. MLB has a streaming platform, MLB TV, which allows you to kind of buy in similarly to how you would for other streaming platforms. A lot of the other major sports are much more complicated. You want to work with hockey, you actually have to buy through ESPN. You want to work with football, you probably can't because it's crazy expensive and you have to be a corporate sponsor of the NFL in order to get access to some of that TV inventory. You want to do it through basketball, they have a streaming product, but you can't do it on a geo-targeted basis. So there's a lot of reasons why. I see what you're after. You should just lead with the jokes, sir. I could have saved me a lot of time. Touche.
Anybody have a non-dick joke?
All the hands just went down.
Yeah.
As you were expanding and obviously going down different product lines, you talked about building the team around that. It's like, what was the structures you were doing within the team to make that happen? And then when things didn't work, how did you repivot?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. Because of the way we founded, and it was the three of us, we had a lot of the initial skill set on the team where I was able to like step in and run channels and manage agencies, et cetera. And then as we got a cleaner handle on what was working, email was working, right? Social was working, search was working, started to bring on specialists in those areas that were just really, really the best of breed in those areas. And then eventually, once we had some of those folks in place, and I needed to roll off into other areas, I was able to hire a really smart, incredibly talented marketer, Will Flaherty, who's still at Row leading the team, to kind of help quarterback that whole thing. So I always encourage people to think about leaning into the channels that are working and bringing in people who really, truly, and deeply understand those channels to get even more and more out of them. And then you can layer people on top. You can let them grow into those roles as well, depending on the size of team. But I haven't seen it work all that often where you bring in like a growth person, and then the growth person has to then go figure out all the individual channels, and they immediately need to go hire a search person and a social person, and like it's a different strategy, kind of like bottom up versus top down. But I always like leaning into like where you're already seeing wins.
Sam?
First of all, congrats on the success.
How'd you get a microphone?
I got
Nice.
the hookup, man. I got the mic hookup. Hopefully this isn't too hard of a question to answer, but over the course of the last 3-5 years with Row, what were the 3 biggest challenges that you saw in growth, and what were the lessons that you learned from those challenges?
Seems like 3 questions, Sam.
It is. 3 in 1. It's a great offer.
3 biggest challenges in growth. I think one is, something everyone's experienced, right, is like going through the iOS changes and dealing with just a shift in kind of like your foundational channels and how to react from that. So I think that's something that anyone who's advertising direct to consumer has felt and has had to figure out how to navigate, and we were certainly no exception there. I think 2 would be figuring out, coming out of COVID, what the new normal looks like. A lot of us probably experienced some really exciting upticks while everyone was stuck at home and literally couldn't go anywhere and needed to buy things on the internet. But then on the other side of that, figuring out like what are new spending habits, what are new channels that actually work, what is messaging that resonates on the other side of now the world has reopened somewhat. And then, I mean, maybe this is a cop-out. Yeah, it's definitely a cop-out, but I think like 3 to 5 years ago, I was spending half of my time just trying to hire people, just trying to hire really great growth people. And it was like a tremendous part of my job was recruiting, pulling people out of other good companies, et cetera. There wasn't an amazing pool of talent because everyone was working. I think now there are more really good, talented folks that are actually like more actively looking. You don't have to pull people out as much. I would say it's just different now than it was in the past. And like, you need to make sure you're putting good people against your best channels. Finding ways to staff that is, obviously pretty critical.
Other than the MLB, have you seen any other television placements that have gotten you spikes as large as baseball?
Other TV placements that got spikes? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, TV is a tricky channel. I'm sure many people in this room have run or experimented on it, but can really pay dividends if you find the right demo and the right types of shows. So like Ro's done a tremendous amount in sports. I'll give you another sports example. Again, hearkening back to like this concept of buy the media first and then let the shiny stuff kind of come along with it. We basically sponsored every preseason basketball tournament you've ever heard of, and most of the ones you haven't. We also sponsored like the 3rd tier March Madness tournament called the CBI, also known as the Roman CBI for many years. The pop that we saw in some of those was pretty incredible, and we bought it more with a mindset of like, premium ESPN ad inventory on Friday and Saturday nights. That's pretty good. Like, what would we pay for that if we were just buying on linear? If we sponsor the tournament, we actually get double the ad units and half the cost, and they get to say it's sponsored by us and the name is on the ball and all of those other things. So there's ways, again, where like even the way that these tournament organizers or the leagues think about it is very different than probably we think about it from a pure media perspective. And I think that's where we've seen some tremendous opportunities coming out of both linear and streaming TV.
All right, we got time for one last question. If anybody wants the last question. No one wants the last question. Okay.
Got their questions
my golden nugget to you. If you want to hear about the CPAs that Bark had or that Roman had, go to Spotify, search up Rob Limited Supply. You'll find it all. And I don't know who interviewed him, but it was a really good interview.
A very handsome young gentleman, I believe. He wasn't wearing a sport coat at the time.
Yeah.
You were really cleaned up.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.